Have you ever wondered how an entire civilization could be held together by just a series of promises? In today's episode of Eras, we're exploring feudalism, a system of loyalty and land, often misunderstood and more intricate than it seems. After the collapse of the mighty Roman Empire in the 5th century, society needed a new structure to survive. What emerged wasn't a master plan, but a system that adapted to the chaos of the times: feudalism. For nearly 1,000 years, this network of loyalty, military service, and land ownership shaped the world, particularly in Western Europe. But what was it really? Contrary to popular belief, feudalism wasn't some grand design of medieval kings. It was a practical solution to the power vacuum left after Rome fell. Society needed to rebuild, and without central governance, the answer came in the form of oaths between men. Lords and vassals, bonded by promises, became the foundation of medieval life. So, how did this system work? At the core of feudalism were three main players: the lords, the vassals, and the peasants. Lords were wealthy nobles who owned large estates. But they couldn't manage or defend all that land on their own. Enter the vassals, warriors or nobles who were given pieces of land, known as fiefs, in exchange for their loyalty and military service to the lord. It was a deal where everyone benefited. Lords got protection and support, while vassals got land and status. At the very bottom were the peasants, or serfs, who worked the land. They weren't exactly free but weren't slaves either. They couldn't leave the land without permission, yet they had certain rights, like protection from their lord. In return for working the land, peasants were granted safety in dangerous times, food, and shelter. It may seem harsh by today's standards, but this system kept society functioning during a time when war and invasions were constant threats. And how did someone enter into this system? Through what was called the commendation ceremony. This ritual cemented the bond between lord and vassal, where the vassal would swear loyalty to the lord, promising to provide military service when needed. In return, the lord would offer protection and, most importantly, land. It was a two-way street, with both sides depending on each other. But what made feudalism really stick was the sense of honor. Your word was everything. If a lord broke his promise, he would lose all legitimacy. The same went for the vassals. Honor, loyalty, and oaths kept this delicate system together for centuries, despite its flaws. Now, many people think of feudalism as a rigid system, with no room to move up in society. And while it's true that upward mobility was difficult, it wasn't impossible. Take William Marshall, for example, a man born into a relatively minor family, who became one of the most famous knights of the medieval era. His courage and military prowess allowed him to climb the ranks, ultimately serving as regent for King Henry III of England. But of course, the feudal system wasn't perfect. One major criticism was the lack of social mobility for most people, especially peasants. Life was hard for the lower classes, and while some peasants eventually gained more rights and even land over time, many lived in harsh conditions. Still, for all its limitations, feudalism brought order to a world that was otherwise chaotic. It ensured that everyone had a role to play, from kings and lords to the lowliest peasants. Another aspect that's often overlooked is how decentralized feudalism was. Kings might have ruled from their thrones, but they weren't meddling in the day-to-day lives of most people. Instead, local lords had direct control over their lands and vassals, which created a system where power was spread out. This decentralization actually helped protect regions from collapse. If one lord failed, it didn't necessarily bring down the entire kingdom. And while Hollywood loves to portray kings as tyrants ruling with an iron fist, in reality, kings had to carefully navigate the loyalty of their vassals. If a king pushed too hard, he could lose support from his nobles, which could lead to rebellion or even the fall of his reign. As we think back on this complex system, it raises an interesting question. If our modern society were to face a massive collapse, like Rome did, could we come up with something better than feudalism? Or would we find ourselves relying on similar structures of loyalty and protection, especially in times of crisis? Feudalism might seem like a relic of the past, but it played a crucial role in holding medieval Europe together, proving that even in the darkest times, society can adapt and survive. Thanks for watching Eras. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Don't forget to follow us on X for daily content like this. And if you want to support our work, consider becoming a member of our channel. Until next time, stay curious.